Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Path and Bounds Creative Office Hour. My name is Stella Guan. I'm the founder and CEO. And today we have a guest who actually graduated from a UX bootcamp. And his portfolio is so unique. It caught my eyes and I really love it. So I really want to speak to him about his UX journey and if he has any advice for people who are just entering into the industry. So, hi, welcome, Jason. How are you?
I'm great. I'm great. Thank you so much. I'm really excited. I'm glad you took a look at my portfolio to begin with, and I'm glad you found it interesting.
Yeah, of course. So I actually came across your portfolio probably on a comment thread, which is, really unexpected. I looked at it and I thought you really stood out in a way that you are not afraid to express yourself, your personality on your portfolio, and you actually put a lot of ideas there, your thoughts on UX and relating to your previous experience. And one thing that you mentioned was actually you eliminated your own roles in one of your previous or many of your previous jobs. And I was like, wait a minute, what is that? I would love to hear that story. So, do you want to tell us what happened?
Oh, sure. Yeah. So in the mid 2000s, I worked at a small company, and I just needed a job. So they hired me because they thought I was smart. So I'm there. I'm trying to figure out what it is I'm supposed to be doing. Basically, they hired me as a like an HR assistant um, to help out with payroll and things like that. And there was just paper files everywhere. Everything was it felt like I was in like the Middle Ages, by filing all these paper things. Um, so one of my first jobs there was just to sort of get a grip on this system that they had for doing payroll. It ended up taking me about a week and a half, along with the HR person, to file and compile all the payroll information. And that's two people a week and a half every 2 weeks. So the rest of the time, we were always playing catch up essentially. Um, so I offered to take over more and more of the process, just to sort of understand it a little bit more. And what I found out while exploring was that it was also a real problem for everyone else in the process. So all the managers out in the field that had to deal with this process were dealing with like inconsistent forms and like having to answer callbacks about things that were not entered correctly. So based on what the people in the field needed to happen to make their job easier, I built a form that was uniform and had basic things like formatted answers so they couldn't put the wrong information in. And then what that allowed me to do was to take those forms and just with a click of a button compile it all. So my week and a half job was done in about 5 minutes. So, once that once they realized that,
Wow.
oh, you could do this with computers. Yes, of course, that's what they're for. But
Yeah.
I went on to do that same thing in accounts receivable with their purchase order system. And then I did the same thing in accounts payable with their quarterly reporting. So I just went from role to role to role, figuring out the most time consuming thing and figuring out a way for to solve it with digital solutions. I then went on to apply that out in the field, doing the sort of like business to consumer interface sort of things as well, and sort of hack that and figure out the best ways to market and to capture data and to deliver really great experiences to our customers. And then the pandemic happens, and I realized I've been doing this sort of user experience design for one company for such a long time that I think that I discovered that I need to do that for myself, and I also need to share my talents with the rest of the world. So that's when I joined the boot camp and took on some clients, and here I am today talking to you.
Yeah, wow, that's awesome. I mean, I love how you kind of, tease that story because it's actually really enticing. People are inherently curious. They're like, wait, what happened? And I think that's such a great conversation opener in any kind of interviews or networking events. And so you've been literally improving user experience from day one. You just didn't officially do it as a designer. So now it inspired you to become a designer, which is wonderful. And you also mentioned that you like to make small changes that have big impacts. And I think that's such a great point because it's really the detail that matters in design. Sometimes we don't have to go crazy and doing, like 5 million things. It's maybe just one or two things that make a huge difference. There was also saying that great design is actually invisible in a way. So, was there a project that you've done before in the past that shows how small changes can have a big impact?
Yeah, actually, again, like early in the pandemic, this is probably one of my first like official like side gig jobs where I took on this task of helping to develop a digital product. Um, and this is again was the early pandemic, and everyone was sort of like canceling everything. They were canceling travel and races and concerts, and um, so at the time, Dr. Rebecca Edelman, she was my girlfriend at the time. We're married now, but at the time we were discussing an idea she had for a project, sort of like an online repository for stories of loss from people that were impacted by COVID-19. I thought this was a really great idea. We discussed the concept, the goals. We discussed it all like sort of at length over the course of a weekend. My sort of insight was I sort of suggested, what if the site doesn't just focus on the losses? What if you sort of open it up to also frame their experiences as something that they have discovered? You know, I discovered that I wanted to do a job that was more creative. I discovered, you know, that having more free time allowed me to focus on my health. So we thought about that. We kicked around the idea a little bit, and the coronavirus lost and found was born. So
Oh,
just out of that sort of framing of telling your story through the lens of either it's a loss or a found, it seems really simple, the lost and found,
yeah,
right? It's something that
that's
is interesting. You never
amazing.
know what's going to be lost or found. It's a discovery
Right.
of something, or and that ability to choose whether you've lost or found something is really empowering to someone that's going to share a story, and it helps to frame it, and it helps to sort of make sense of this
Oh,
sort of thing that has
that's
been thrust
awesome.
upon you. Yeah.
Yeah. So, is that a live website now, or what is
It's
it?
still a live website. If you go to pandemicarchive.com, you can share your story. I've shared a couple stories anonymously. There are hundreds of stories from all over the globe. She's written about it in journals. So there are classes that are being taught right now that use it as examples, and it just continues to be this resource. And I think it's important for us, especially now, since we're all sort of like rushing to get back to normalcy, to have this sort of record of a time when things were so unsure. We don't want to lose sight of that, because even as we're trying to get back to normal, we need to keep in mind what we just went through. We still have to heal from that. We still have to sort of
Yeah.
reconcile a lot of those losses.
Yeah.
So,
I
or or
I
or
love
or
that.
or keep in touch with the things that we
Keep
found.
in touch with it.
Yeah,
Yeah. No,
absolutely. So
absolutely.
yeah, so it's really
It's sort of
important.
like a time capsule that
Yeah,
you created. And also, now more than ever, people are craving shared experience, remotely, or whatnot. It's something that you can create for people, and actually means a lot, right? For people that you haven't even met.
right.
And I really love that. Yeah, thanks for telling us about this project. And if our listeners and viewers are interested, definitely check it out. Awesome. So, in your website, you also mentioned that you like to generate a lot of ideas when you design, even if most of them won't be used at the end. And I really I can really relate to that because not all ideas are going to be the final one. But designers sometimes they like to self-censor in their head because they are afraid that these ideas suck and people are going to view them, differently if they hear that. So how do you overcome the fear of imperfection yourself?
Yeah, wow. You're you're hitting me right at the core here. Yeah, sharing ideas. Yeah, it can feel like a bit like you're about to jump off a cliff, right? Or do like a high dive,
Hmm.
right? Uh,
Yeah.
Especially if your audience is like you're afraid they're going to be too critical, or if they're just too literal, or if they're not used to the concept of like brainstorming or ideation.
Mhm.
Um, I love bad ideas. Actually, I'm just in.
Mm.
I think that the most ridiculous, inefficient ideas that are never going to work are really
Yeah.
important to a creative process. But let me come
Yes.
back to that a little bit. A good way to sort of foster unbridled creativity is to give it space and a framework. Right? You think, oh well, if you're not giving, if you have a blank canvas, that's as much time, and no, you want to give it like give your crazy thoughts attention and
Yeah.
space. Like
Mhm.
like you set a timer for like 5 minutes and give yourself or your team um, a set amount of time to write down or sketch as many solutions as possible for a particular problem. And that all even that may be tricky at first because even then you might still be like still self-censoring or trying to overcome that sort of conditioning of like, oh, these are bad ideas, because we're conditioned. Society tends to repress the crazy
Yeah.
ideas.
Mhm.
So I like to do something else first, which is to try to think of the most ridiculous, like Rube Goldbergian solution before starting my exercise. Like, what would definitely not work? What is
Mm.
what's an expensive,
I
outlandish
love that.
solution? It's like stretching before a workout. Like,
Yeah.
you don't go and do a race by stretching your legs as far as you can, but it's good to
Right.
do it beforehand just to get those sort of systems moving. Um,
Mhm.
and sometimes actually bad ideas can contain little nuggets of like a fantastic like new
Yeah.
concept, right? So for instance,
Mhm.
like developers are in a meeting discussing like room dimensions for a new project, and no one can quite come to an agreement on like what those room dimensions should be. Should we have like big living rooms or small living rooms or tiny bedrooms or like
Yeah.
non-existent kitchens? What are we going to do? And some young upstart comes and says, what if we just make the walls movable? That's a crazy idea. You can't put
Mhm.
plumbing in
Yeah.
moving walls. You can't get a
Yeah.
certificate of occupancy with moving walls, but
Right.
you can build a mock-up in a warehouse where you have moving
Yeah.
walls and you can tour people through there and get
Mhm.
real data on what works and what doesn't work by
Yeah.
having a flexible model. So there's
I
your
love that.
there's your crazy dumb idea
Yeah.
with a real practical application.
Yeah, I love that. I love your analogy. I mean, personally, I love real estate and always love any analogy relating to that. And it's, because I think, sometimes when we work in environments where it's more like corporate or it's not like as creative, we oftentimes tell ourselves that we don't need to do that many creative stuff or we are
Yeah,
not allowed to, but that's not really true. We're kind of limiting ourselves if we kind of self-censor them. So I really recommend your approach, even if it's something that you do it internally, right? You don't have to present it to the client, you can do it
right,
internally.
right.
And that's something that's actually going to up level the creativity of your entire team and yourself. So love that, and thanks for sharing.
Of course.
So yeah. So you also mentioned that you like to hunt for inefficiencies and improve them. And that's something that's really valuable, I think. So tell us a time when you found small or big inefficiencies. What was it, and what did you do about it?
So this is a really interesting and fun question. Of course, I built my entire like career at my last company by doing these sort of things. But if I go back through like all the dozens of jobs that I've had throughout my life, there was one time where I was actually working in a bagel shop with,
Oh,
we made bagels and we made
yeah,
sandwiches and eggs and
yeah,
bacon and all that kind of stuff.
uh-huh,
And typically I worked in the line where you add the toppings and stuff, right?
Oh,
Um,
right.
and the sort of like uh, the quarterback position, right? The position that was the most difficult was the person that was like making the eggs and the bacon and stuff like that. Like that was
Mhm,
considered like the
mhm.
toughest job. Like that was the one thing that you got to do it right, or it holds up the team and it makes everything slower, right? So I was always observing how the line cook person would sort of like react with wait until the order was placed on the board, and then start making the eggs and stuff, and then something would change and they would spend so much time like trying to react, and the grill would get gross and need to be cleaned, and it would just take the whole operation down, right? So they had
Yeah, yeah.
all the potential to like slow everything down. So um, one day I had the opportunity to do it myself, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to do it just completely differently. I'm going to spend any free moment I have up by the cashier. So I want to be the first person to hear what the order is, so that I can then take that information, go ahead and like, I'll do some extra things. I'll cut the bagel for the people on the line, and I'll go ahead and start that order before they're even paying for it. That way I've got an extra 15, 20 seconds to like finish up that order, and then walk back up and listen to the next people, so that
Wow.
I can keep that little thing going in my head, and just be a few steps ahead and work that way instead of trying to be behind. And that
Yeah.
methodology actually ended up being, I taught that methodology to a couple other line cooks, and we would have lines out the door before, and we just kept that line
Uh-huh.
moving, and just that one little change where instead
Wow.
of standing by the grill, you just go stand up by the counter. Of course, if I had any like real power to like make any real change, I would have just changed the operation
Yeah.
to a digital operation so that you can
Right.
see them as they're ordering,
Yeah.
or like an earpiece or something so
Wow.
you can hear the customers. But just like
Yeah.
changing where I stood changed my capacity to work ahead. Yeah, so that's a long ago 20-year-old
That's
Jason solution. Yeah.
yeah. No, that's amazing because it actually, as you were describing it, it reminds me of my time back in when I was working in Manhattan, in New York, and we have so many of these operations, right, for lunch, and you just line
Hmm.
up, and then people like, it's an assembly line where you kind of make a sandwich or a salad or whatever it is, and sometimes I was kind of impressed. I was like, how do they make it so quick? So it really
Yeah.
has sort of a process experience design in it in a way,
Information
and I think
flow.
you were probably pioneering, I know that flow, which is
Pioneering
awesome. I
sandwich
mean, I
making.
exactly, and they should pay you for that, like a patented, design or something. You could be a consultant, at the
Yeah,
higher level to these companies.
I've actually really thought about
Yeah.
pivoting this career at some point into service design, because
Yeah.
it's not just digital products. So all you user experience designers and researchers out there, it's not just digital products, it's real
No.
products. It's everywhere
Exactly.
you go. Everyone can benefit
Yeah.
from user
Oh,
experience
absolutely.
design.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, maybe in the future we won't have lines ever again when you wait for well, you don't wait for lunch. There's something else that you could do,
Exactly,
right?
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Except
So,
for
I
except for
mean,
those instances where lines are necessary as part of the experience. Or
yes,
if you
it's kind
want
of
to
like
build
creating that
anticipation.
exactly, that, PR effect. They're like, "Oh my god, I
That's
gotta line
right.
up too because it's so popular." No, that's totally a PR stunt. I love
Oh
that.
yeah.
So yeah. So you mentioned that you make things work even if you don't have the right tools or resources sometimes, and I think that's really great, and I admire that because oftentimes we work in less than ideal environments. No matter what you do, you are not going to have 100% of what you need. Especially if you're working for a startup, right? And you also showed
Yeah.
us an example of when you design I don't know if it's a lighting solution or something that you designed for a band. I was really
Yeah.
intrigued by that, so I really want to know what happened there.
Yeah. So this band Free Soil, they make very like intense music, and they have one of their band members is a videographer. So it's mostly like like drum machine music with live guitars and live bass. And it's just it really builds an intensity, and it's just a multi-sensory experience. Um, but if you've ever been to like a live concert, like the really impactful ones always have like, like bright lights, like pars and strobes and moving lights and
Mhm.
things that create an
Yep.
atmosphere. It just enhances this
Mhm.
feeling, right? So it makes it
Mhm.
very otherworldly. No other time in your life are you in a room that's lit this way. That's a very unique thing.
Right.
Um, but like Free
Exactly.
Soil is like a new band, right? So they don't have money to hire like a lighting person or like to
Ah.
buy all these like expensive rigs. So I'm looking
Mhm.
into it, and I'm looking at like solutions, and a lot of times it requires like a big bulky desk with lots of knobs and faders that are complicated to like
Wow.
program, or like in a dedicated computer that then has to be synced with like the whatever instrumentation they're using. But I did a little bit of
Yeah.
research, and I found a little box that converts MIDI, which is music interface data information or something along those
Yep.
lines. So basically, like music
Mhm.
information from a drum machine, and it would convert that into DMX control, which is the language that is used by lighting.
Mhm.
So I
Yep.
basically created a little interface that you could take their drum machine, which they already had, and control the lights. So if you watch the little video on my site, I picked I think one of the more
Yeah.
intense moments. So every time the
Mhm.
kick drum, the lights get more and more intense as the
Ah,
kick drum gets louder and louder and louder, and as things go
amazing.
starts to go crazy, then you've got strobe lights and everything just sort of brightens up,
Right.
and it doesn't require like a whole lot of technical knowledge, just a
Yeah.
little bit of extra programming. Yeah.
Wow, that's awesome. I really love how, you're able to make things work, and that it's a valuable skills that you can translate to many different areas. And especially, like I said, a startup, right? They really look for people like that because they,
Yeah.
like the band, oftentimes don't have as much resources.
Right.
So it's really interesting to hear someone, like designing lighting because, for example, if you ask me, I'd be like, wait a minute, I've never designed that before. How can I do that? It's so intimidating. But it's that you were able to create something that sync with the music, right? So
Right.
that's usually it costs, I don't know, a lot of money,
It
right? It
costs
costs a lot of
thousands
money
of
to do.
thousands of dollars,
Yeah.
and then to also pay the technician that is going to run the
Mhm.
lights. Yeah, so
Exactly. Yeah.
this was not necessarily a ready-made solution. It's something that you
Mhm.
had to like there is a little adapter that I could buy, but then you have to like sort of implement it and sort
Yeah.
of build the sort of the process around it. And yeah,
Yeah.
so that's something that is like repeatable and adjustable and flexible, and can be done on the fly. So there's no extra there's no extra personnel, right? So
Yeah.
and you could do something that
Exactly.
like a local band wouldn't normally have like an elaborate light show, but this
Yes.
band is very special because not only do they have like a fantastic videographer or a
Yeah.
video
Mhm.
VJ, but they also have
Yeah.
like lights and like
Yeah.
and it syncs with
They
the
have
music and
you.
like yeah.
Yeah, awesome. Well,
Yeah,
if there's any music fan listening to us or watching us, you know what to do next
that's
time you have
right.
a show. Yeah. So, yeah, another thing that I noticed on your site is you actually incorporated a comic strip somewhere on your site, and it's about a woman on a bike, and how a bike app can help someone get out of a tricky real life situation. You also have another chart that shows why people would hire you and what it would be like to hire you. So I think both are really creative, and I love it a lot. It shows your
Oh, thanks.
personality. Yeah, what advice do you have for designers who are maybe a little bit shy and they don't really want to talk about themselves too much? How can they still show their personalities?
Yeah, that's tricky. I mean, believe it or not, I might be animated in talking to you, but this is a learned skill.
Yeah.
So my first advice is practice.
Mhm.
Practice talking about it. Um, I'm not. huge on self promotion. I like to solve problems. I find that
Yeah.
way more satisfying than seeking attention.
Hmm.
But the kind of problems you may want to solve, you designers out there trying to find your voice, they're not just going to come to you. The
Yeah.
problem that you have to solve is how to present yourself in a clear and honest way that is going to attract the attention of the people that need their problem solved by you, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah,
yeah, if
exactly. I
you,
think, yeah, you mentioned something really important. It's kind of like, reaching out to people and also voicing your opinion and writing articles and sometimes doing a little bit of self promotion isn't just about, okay, I want attention to me, so I feel great. It's about you attracting the people who are who need you, who may think similar to you, or who likes your ideas to
oh,
kind of like
exactly,
make something happen, right? So that's
right,
really like you establishing your own community and amplifying your impact. It's
right.
not about, oh wow, it's so vain. I mean, it sounds like it, but it's not. So I think you had a really great point.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, it's not vain at all. And even all the great people that we really admire, like they didn't exist in a vacuum. Albert
Yep.
Einstein, he
Hmm.
may have been a genius, but he didn't become one of the world's greatest minds on his own. Like he
Yeah.
had a posse. He had like Niels Bohr, like all these people
Yeah.
that were challenging him and
Yep.
and praising his ideas and like really like they helped create him. So like all the people
Yep.
that were critical of his ideas helped
Mhm.
him defend them. And he had some
Yeah.
bad ideas. Not everything he thought about was
Yeah.
perfect, and we're finding that
Right.
out today. But had he like kept to himself and had he been
Mhm.
shy about his crazy
Right.
ideas, we would not know about him.
Yeah,
So
we
my
wouldn't know about him.
right, we wouldn't know about Einstein, right? And that's a crazy thought.
Yeah.
My
Ooh,
wife gave me a
scary.
little yellow book. She gave me a little book after I finished my first design class. It's called "Show Your Work" by Austin Kleon. It's
Oh.
Kleon, Kleon. It's a tiny little
Hmm.
book. It's like a little coffee table book, and it's like a great little primer on self promotion.
Hmm.
Um,
Oh.
and one thing that like really sort of stuck out to me is he quotes Wayne Coyne, who is the front man for the band The Flaming Lips. Coyne was working in fast
Yeah.
food as a teenager, and he got held up, and he thought he was going to die. He was working
Oh
a sort of
no.
meaningless job, and suddenly he thinks he's going to die. And in realizing his mortality, he thinks, "I'm not going to sit here and wait for things to happen. I'm going to make them happen. And if people think I'm an idiot, I don't
Yeah.
care." Right? So that was his sort of moment, and I think that if you haven't had that moment, like find it,
Yeah.
seek it out, like read
Yeah.
read obituaries or something to like sort of bring your
Yeah.
mortality and make you realize that your time is the most valuable thing that you have, and that
Absolutely.
if you are a quiet designer and you have all these little special skills that you're keeping to yourself, then you're doing not only are you doing yourself a disservice, but you're doing the rest of the universe a disservice.
Yeah.
You have a special talent.
Yeah. I
My
love that. I love that.
my advice is, you know, find your voice, and if you can't find your voice, write down whatever, and then ask someone if they like it,
Yeah.
and they will tell you, "Oh, this isn't so
Yeah. I
good." But
love
then you fix that part, and then you do it again, and then you change it again, and
Yeah.
then you put it out more,
Yeah.
and the more you put it out, and the more people will want to help you, and then you'll find that someday you're helping other people, or you're talking on a podcast about your branding and telling stories,
Yeah.
and that's how the connections are made. That's how inspiration happens, and that's how you go from being someone that's unhappy with their place in life to someone that's inspiring other people.
Wow, I love that. I love that. And if our listeners or viewers want to read that book, definitely check it out. I'm gonna add it to my shopping cart
There you
soon.
go.
I think that sounds really cool. Yeah. So I think it's very apparent to me, throughout your work and your site that you're a very good storyteller. And as an educator, I always tell my students that even if you're not a producer or a journalist, you should be able to tell great stories with your design and also in your presentation. So, how important do you think it is for them to learn how to tell stories yourself? And have you reaped any benefits from your storytelling skills?
Oh, I think that storytelling is the most important part because if you can know about data-driven design, you can know about human-centered design, but if you go into a firm that doesn't necessarily value design and they think that, oh, well, you're just here to make it look pretty, and
Yeah.
you have some critical information that you know is going to make their product better, if you can't tell the story of the user in a compelling way, that opportunity might be missed.
Hmm.
And that doesn't benefit anyone. That lets down the user, that lets down the CEO, that lets down all the stakeholders. And it's a business; they want to make money, but you need to do your part to make sure to defend your design decisions, like always. So that's really hard to do. So my suggestion there is to actually step out of the design world to learn about storytelling.
Hmm.
Joseph Campbell is great. The hero's journey to sort of look at what a great story, what are the elements of a great story. There's you go out into the world and you find your sort of call to action, right? You have your call to adventure, and then you find your guide, and then you discover a new skill, and then you fight the demon, and then you return home triumphantly. That's
Yeah.
basically just a storyboard where
Yeah.
your user, like the storyboard that I as on my
Yeah.
website, where someone is
Yeah.
riding a bike. They get
Uh-huh.
their wheel is squeaking, and they use an app that tells them how to fix it, and they triumphantly ride
Yeah.
home. That's storytelling. So
Yeah.
that's telling the story of
Yeah.
a user, right? So there's a couple
Yeah.
things that I would suggest. Like if you know anybody that writes scripts, or if you have friends that are writers, ask them what makes a good story. Because if you,
Yeah.
I know that if you set up the framework, and you have a compelling character, which is our persona, right? And then you have a
Yeah. Yeah.
relatable challenge, which is the pain points, and then you have this sort of the solution, the hero, which can be your product. And then you have this
Hmm.
epilogue, this beautiful epilogue where they're in love with it. So that's the sort of the golden path, is just it's storytelling, right? And
Yeah.
if you can
Wow.
master that, you can become like the
Mhm.
person that people go to for answers, because you can
Yeah.
translate these problems into understandable scenarios.
That's just really amazing because as again as you described, my head was just going somewhere where I'm like seeing a superhero movie almost,
Yeah.
like return triumphantly
Right.
and save
Yeah.
the world, right? No,
Yeah.
I love how you like how you describe it. It's actually very people probably don't realize that enough, but it's actually very storytelling driven already what we're doing
Yeah.
in UX design, because we design a persona and there's a process. There's like, these ups and downs. There's iterations, which means you have to encounter some obstacles and then you'll have to find out a solution. So it's kind of like like the conflicts in a story. And there's like like a climax, which, hopefully the problems is solved
Right.
and it comes to a resolution. So I actually never thought of it that way, and actually gave me a new perspective. And on the other hand, I think integrating that into the business side of things, right? Because UX design and many other types of design, they design for business purposes. It's not art. It sometimes art helps a little bit, but you have to integrate that to connect with your target audience, the customers. And if you are someone who are well versed in that, you immediately kind of elevate yourself to someone who's extremely business savvy and also can kind of help the business with the marketing effort, and that's even more valuable,
Oh,
that you can
absolutely.
present to anyone. Yeah, so awesome. So to wrap it up, I want to ask you, do you have any current side projects, fun things that you're working on, or upcoming plans that you would like to share with us?
Oh, well, sure. Yeah. So I've been freelancing for a while. So of course I'm job hunting, always looking for more projects. And right now I've teamed up with a brilliant developer who's working on a decentralized data platform so that users can have control of their own digital footprint. So all your stuff that's out there on like Netflix, all your stuff that's in Google
Yeah.
and like Spotify, so that you can sort of control all that data. So that's a really fun and exciting project that I'm doing that I think is going to actually help a lot of people. And that's called
Very
Papiri.
cool.
It's on GitHub. It's open source. So if anybody is out there
Oh,
looking to contribute, it's out there.
check it out. Yeah, no, I love that. I mean, decentralize everything is the future, and hopefully that makes us more free and more safe. And still a long way to go before that,
Still a
but
long way to
I
go.
love
Yeah.
it that you're involved in something. Yeah, a long way
Yeah.
to go,
Thanks.
but awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing, so much of your wisdom for us today, because I think I certainly learned a lot, and I hope
Awesome.
everybody who's listening and watching learned something as well. To hear more of this, amazing talk with emerging and established creatives, please stay tuned to us on Path and Bound on all social media platforms. My name is Stella Guan. I'm the founder and CEO. We will see you again next time.